Why is Ty Cobb saying Pam Bondi should be at the top of it?
Well, you know what's so interesting about that clip you just played, Katie, is that those indictments were handed down during the Nixon administration. Richard Nixon was still president. He didn't resign until August. And it just shows you what a different world we're living in right now, because even then, even as he was trying to preserve his viability and stay in office, he knew, because there was still a sense of shame in politics and there was still a public opinion, sort of one truth that people who watched the nightly news agreed to. He knew that he had to satisfy the public. There clearly was a scandal. People clearly committed misconduct. And so the Justice Department was indicting these people. That would never happen in the Trump administration. It's very clear.
Pam Bondi broke from the tradition of her predecessors in not trusting the judgment of career prosecutors and deciding who to charge and following and accepting directives from the president. All of that is fairly unusual, if not unique, in our nation's history. I think that one thing we have seen in this Justice Department, and this is, consistent from day one, is that there's been a total repudiation of the norms that have governed prior Justice Departments in terms of the separation of the prosecutorial function from the White House.
All right, so picture this. You're sitting in a federal courtroom, right? Everything's going the way these things normally go. Lawyers arguing, judge listening, the whole 9 yards. And then, out of nowhere, one of Trump's own lawyers just gets up and walks out, like literally storms out of the courtroom. Can you believe this? Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe they had an emergency. Maybe they got sick. Maybe their parking meter ran out or something. But no, this lawyer walked out right after the judge basically called him out for unlawful conduct. We're talking about a federal judge saying on the record that there's evidence Trump's legal services were potentially used in the commission of a crime. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. A federal judge on the record saying there's evidence of criminal activity involving the president's own legal team. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. And here's the thing that absolutely wild about all of this. This isn't just some random attorney we're talking about. This is Evan Courtroom, one of Trump's personal lawyers in the classified documents case. You know, that case where Trump allegedly took boxes and boxes of classified material to Mar-a-Lago? That one. The judge looked at the evidence and said, yeah, we need to pierce attorney-client privilege here. Do you know how serious that is? Like, attorney-client privilege is basically sacred in the legal world. It's one of the foundational protections that makes our entire justice system work. Judges don't just throw that out the window unless something really, really bad is going on. They need solid evidence. They need to believe that the privilege is being used to further criminal activity. And that's exactly what this judge determined was happening here. But wait, it gets better or worse, depending on how you look at it. Because this whole courtroom drama is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got count them, three Trump administration lawyers who've been accused of professional misconduct, 3 separate attorneys. And we're not talking about minor stuff here. We're talking about misleading a federal judge. We're talking about admitting to unlawful acts on the record. This is the kind of stuff that gets lawyers disbarred, people. So a legal watchdog group filed bar complaints against these DOJ lawyers back in July. And you know what they said? They said, and I'm quoting directly here, the rule of law is currently facing a direct threat when individuals within the legal system neglect their responsibilities. That's not some random person on Twitter saying that. That's an official legal oversight group putting it in writing. And then we find out that Alina Habba, another one of Trump's lawyers, was ruled to be unlawfully appointed as acting U.S. attorney. Unlawfully appointed. Like, the whole thing was illegal from the start. The judge dropped that ruling in August, and it just blew up the whole procedural foundation of what they were trying to do. Now, Trump's team is calling all of this a witch hunt. Obviously, they're saying it's all corrupt games designed to undercut constitutional rights. And look, you can have your own opinion on that, but here's what's not an opinion. Here's what's just straight up facts. A federal judge looked at the evidence and said there was enough to believe that legal services were being used to commit crimes. That's not political spin. That's a judge in a courtroom on the record making that determination. And the craziest part, this is all happening while Trump is in his second term as president. This isn't campaign drama. This isn't election season chaos. This is the sitting president of the United States dealing with lawyers who are being accused of breaking the law while representing him. Are you kidding me? The legal community is absolutely losing it over this. I mean, you've got lawyers and legal analysts on every news channel just going off about how unprecedented this all is, because it is unprecedented. When was the last time you saw a president's lawyer storm out of a federal courtroom after a judge basically accused them of helping commit crimes? But here's what nobody's really talking about, and this is where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about one lawyer walking out of one courtroom. This is about a pattern. This is about multiple lawyers, multiple accusations, multiple judges saying something's not right here. When you start seeing that kind of pattern, that's when you know something big is happening. So yeah, buckle up, because what I'm about to break down for you is going to show you exactly what's going on behind the scenes, and trust me, it's way bigger than just one dramatic courtroom moment. Okay, so let's back up for a second and really dig into what's happening here. Because most people, when they see headlines like this, they just see courtroom drama. They see another Trump controversy, but they're missing the actual story. They're missing why this matters so much. First off, let's talk about what attorney-client privilege actually means, because I think a lot of people hear that term and they're like, yeah, whatever, it's some legal thing. But no, this is fundamental to how our entire legal system works. When you talk to your lawyer, that conversation is protected. The government can't force your lawyer to testify about what you said. It goes back centuries. The whole concept is that you need to be able to speak freely and honestly with your attorney without fear that those conversations will be used against you later. But here's the thing. There's an exception. It's called the crime fraud exception. And basically, if a judge believes that you're using your lawyer to help you commit a crime or a fraud, then that privilege goes away. Poof, gone. The judge can force your lawyer to testify against you. But judges almost never do this. Like, it's super rare because the bar is really high. You need actual evidence that crimes are being committed. So when that judge ordered Evan Corcoran to testify in the classified documents case, that wasn't just some routine procedural thing. That was the judge saying, I've looked at the evidence and I believe there's enough here to show that legal services were potentially being used in the commission of a crime. That's massive. That's a federal judge essentially saying, yeah, something criminal might be going on here and we need to know what the lawyer knows about it. And Corcoran? He wasn't happy about it. Reports from inside that courtroom say he was visibly angry and then he just left, got up and walked out. Now, you can't just walk out of a federal courtroom during proceedings. That's not how this works. There are procedures, there are protocols. But walking out in the middle of proceedings, that's contempt of court territory. But he did it anyway, and that tells you something about how heated this situation got. But let's zoom out even further, because this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? This is all connected to the classified documents investigation. The FBI went to Mar-a-Lago. They found all these boxes of classified material. Trump said it was all declassified or personal stuff or whatever. The National Archives had been asking for these documents for months. There were subpoenas issued, and through all of this, the government kept saying they weren't getting everything back. And Corcoran was right in the middle of it. He was one of the lawyers dealing directly with the Justice Department about those documents. So when the judge says, yeah, we need to hear what this lawyer knows, that's potentially devastating for Trump's case, because Corcoran knows what Trump said. He knows what Trump did. He knows what instructions Trump gave. And now he might have to testify about all of it. But wait, there's more. Because while that drama was unfolding, we've got this whole other situation with Alana Habba. Now, if you've been following Trump's legal battles, you know who Habba is. She's been representing Trump in multiple cases. She's been on TV defending him. She's been very vocal, very aggressive in her defense of Trump. And in August, a federal judge ruled that her appointment as acting U.S. attorney was unlawful. Unlawful. Not improper, not questionable, unlawful. Which means everything she did in that role, potentially invalid. Every decision she made, every filing she submitted, every argument she presented, all of it now has this massive question mark hanging over it. And you know what Trump's team said about that ruling? They called it a witch hunt. They said it was corrupt games. But here's the problem with that defense. It's coming from a judge, a federal judge who looked at the actual law and the actual facts and said, nope, this appointment doesn't meet the legal requirements. That's not politics. That's law. So now we've got two major situations with Trump's lawyers. But wait, it gets worse. Because in July, a legal watchdog group filed bar complaints against 3 Justice Department lawyers working on Trump-related matters. 3. And these complaints aren't minor. They're accusing these lawyers of misleading a federal judge, of not meeting their professional responsibilities, of threatening the rule of law itself. The watchdog group put out a statement saying, the rule of law is currently facing a direct threat when individuals within the legal system neglect their responsibilities. And think about that for a second. This is an official oversight organization saying that lawyers in the Justice Department are neglecting their responsibilities so badly that it's threatening the rule of law. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because Trump's defenders are saying this is all politically motivated. They're saying the deep state is going after Trump's lawyers to weaken his defense. They're saying these judges are biased. And look, you can believe that if you want. That's your right. But here's what you can't ignore. These are multiple judges in multiple cases in multiple jurisdictions, all coming to similar conclusions. These are bar complaints from legal oversight groups. These are official rulings on the record. At some point, you've got to ask yourself, is every single judge biased? Is every single oversight group corrupt? Because that's what you have to believe for the witch hunt narrative to fully hold up. Or, and hear me out here, or is there actually something going on that deserves scrutiny? Because that's the question nobody wants to ask. Everyone wants to pick a team. Everyone wants to say either Trump's completely innocent or Trump's completely guilty. But what if it's more complicated than that? And here's the thing that's really getting lost in all of this, the precedent being set. Because right now, we're watching a sitting president deal with multiple lawyers facing serious allegations of misconduct. We're watching attorney-client privilege get pierced in a case involving presidential documents. And whatever happens with Trump specifically, these precedents will remain. The legal community is having this debate right now. You've got some lawyers saying, finally, accountability. You've got other lawyers saying, this is dangerous overreach. And both sides have valid points. Because on one hand, yeah, nobody should be above the law, not even the president. But on the other hand, if we start eroding fundamental legal protections, like attorney-client privilege, where does it stop? This is why this story matters so much more than just the drama. This is why the viral headlines and the social media wars are actually missing the point. Because what's happening in these courtrooms right now is going to affect American law and presidential power for decades to come. All right, so let's break this down into simple terms. Because there are three main things you need to understand about this whole situation. Three core points that explain what's really going on and why it matters. Point number one, the legal walls are closing in on Trump's defense strategy. Look, Trump has always had a specific approach to legal battles. Delay, delay, delay. Attack the prosecutors. Attack the judges. Call everything a witch hunt. Use every legal tool available to slow things down. And for years, it worked pretty well. Cases got delayed. Public opinion got muddy. The news cycle moved on to something else. Because now you've got judges who are basically saying, nope, we're not doing this dance anymore. When a federal judge pierces attorney-client privilege and forces your lawyer to testify against you, that's a game changer. That's not something you can appeal away easily. That's your own lawyer having to get on the stand and potentially tell the court things you told them in confidence. In the classified documents case, that's arguably the most serious legal issue Trump is facing. Because we're not talking about business fraud or campaign finance violations. We're talking about national security documents. We're talking about classification systems that exist to protect American intelligence sources and methods. Think about what classified documents actually mean for a second. These aren't just papers with confidential stamped on them. We're talking about intelligence briefings that could reveal sources in foreign countries. We're talking about military plans. We're talking about information that, if it falls into the wrong hands, could literally get people killed. And the allegation is that these documents were just sitting at Mar-a-Lago in boxes where who knows who could have seen them. And when Courtroom, Trump's own lawyer, has to testify about what he knows, that could reveal everything. What did Trump tell him about the documents? Did Trump admit he knew they were classified? Did Trump give instructions to hide them or move them? These are the kinds of questions that Courtroom might have to answer now. Point number two, the professional misconduct allegations are creating a different kind of problem. So forget the courtroom drama for a second. Let's talk about what happens when lawyers get accused of misleading judges and acting unlawfully. Because that's a whole separate issue that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. When you're a lawyer, you have something called a professional license. You pass the bar exam, you got admitted to practice law, and that license is how you make your living. But that license can be taken away. If a bar association finds that you've engaged in serious misconduct, it can suspend your license or even disbar you completely. And once you're disbarred, that's it. Your legal career is over. So these three Justice Department lawyers who have bar complaints filed against them, their entire careers are potentially on the line. And if they get disbarred, they can't represent Trump anymore. They can't represent anyone anymore. Like, imagine spending 7 years in college and law school, passing one of the hardest exams in the country, building a career for decades, and then losing it all because you got caught up in political controversies and crossed ethical lines. Same thing with Alina Habba being ruled unlawfully appointed. That's the kind of thing that follows you forever in the legal community. Even if she doesn't get disbarred, every future case she works on, opposing counsel is going to bring this up. Every future judge is going to know about it. Her credibility is damaged, maybe permanently. And here's what that means for Trump. It means he's running out of lawyers. Good lawyers don't want to take on a client who's this high profile and this controversial if there's a real risk of professional misconduct allegations. Nobody wants to risk their entire career. So Trump is increasingly left with lawyers who are either true believers, willing to risk everything, or lawyers who aren't top-tier talent. You've already seen this pattern, right? Trump has gone through so many lawyers. Some quit, some got fired, some just distanced themselves when things got too hot, and now he's dealing with lawyers who are facing bar complaints and unlawful appointment rulings. That's not a strong legal team. That's a team that's barely holding together. Point number three, this is all happening while Trump is president. And this is the part that really blows my mind. because we're not talking about candidate Trump or former President Trump or private citizen Trump. We're talking about the current sitting president of the United States, the guy who's in the Oval Office right now, the guy who's making decisions about foreign policy and domestic policy, and who's supposed to be running the country. And he's dealing with all of this, multiple lawyers facing misconduct allegations, court hearings where his attorneys are storming out, judges piercing attorney-client privilege, bar complaints, federal rulings declaring appointments unlawful. It's absolutely insane when you really think about it. Like, how do you focus on being president when you're constantly dealing with legal drama? And you know what the Trump team keeps saying? They keep saying it's all politically motivated. They keep saying it's all politically motivated. They keep saying it's all politically motivated. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that politics doesn't influence these decisions at all. But here's the thing. At some point, you got to deal with the actual facts. At some point, you got to address the actual allegations. And when multiple federal judges in multiple cases are all raising similar concerns, when legal oversight groups are filing official bar complaints, when your own lawyers are being forced to testify against you, you can't just call it all a witch hunt and expect that to be a sufficient answer. The polling on this is really interesting too, because public trust in the legal system is already pretty low. People are skeptical of lawyers, skeptical of judges, skeptical of the whole system. And stories like this just make it worse. Half the country looks at this and says, see, Trump's corrupt, his lawyers are corrupt, the whole thing is corrupt. The other half looks at it and says, see, the system is out to get Trump, it's all rigged, you can't trust any of it. And both of those reactions just further erode trust in institutions, which is maybe the biggest long-term problem here, because whether you support Trump or oppose him, whether you think he's innocent or guilty, we all need a functioning legal system. We all need to be able to trust that judges are following the law, that lawyers are acting ethically, that the system works. The partisan divide on this is just getting worse and worse. You've got Republicans who will defend Trump no matter what happens. You've got Democrats who will attack Trump no matter what he says. And in the middle, you've got regular people who are just confused and frustrated and tired of all the drama. So what comes next? Well, more hearings, more filings, more appeals. The classified documents case is still ongoing. The bar complaints are still being investigated. Corcoran's testimony is going to be huge if it actually happens. And you can bet that every move in these cases is going to be analyzed to death by lawyers and pundits and political operatives on both sides. But here's what you need to watch for. Watch for whether other lawyers start distancing themselves from Trump. Watch for whether any of these bar complaints actually result in serious consequences. Watch for whether the classified documents case leads to actual charges, because those are the things that will tell you where this is really headed. And look, I know this is exhausting. I know you're tired of Trump controversies, but this one's different. This one's not just about politics. This one's about whether lawyers can help clients commit crimes and get away with it. This one's about whether presidents are truly accountable under the law. So yeah, that lawyer storming out of the courtroom, that's just the beginning, because what's coming next is going to make that look tame. Trust me on this one. The legal battles of Trump's second term are just getting started, and they're about to get a whole lot more intense. We'll be watching every move, every filing, every ruling, every dramatic courtroom moment, because this story is far from over, not even close.